Hello, welcome back to another episode of Monday Bagel. Today we have a very special guest, Namita Viswanath, a partner at Indus Law and one of India's top technology lawyers as ranked by Legal 500 and Asia Law. Namita leads the technology law practice at Indus Law and is renowned across all sectors for her expertise in software, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data privacy, and more. And we'll be diving into AI in India's legal sector, exploring its adoption, regulation, challenges, and future. It's a timely and crucial topic as India navigates the intersection of law and cutting edge technology. Namita, it's great you could join me today.
Thank you, Michael, for having me over. And hello, everyone.
Can you give us an overview of how AI is currently being used in the legal sector in India?
India presently is at a very nascent stage insofar as AI is concerned. Um, while there is no existing AI legal framework in India, that hasn't stopped really the usage of AI tools across sectors, including in the legal industry. So, in law firms, in lawyers' chambers, you typically find AI tools used for research, for drafting, paraphrasing sentences, comparing documents, etc. In fact, I'm very proud to share that as a firm, we have developed our own AI tool called InBot, and we use this really to search and pull out most relevant documents from a knowledge management repository. So that is one place where we find AI to be immensely helpful. Outside of this, we also have we've incubated legal tech startup called Hissa that really uses AI enabled tools to help different corporates manage their cap table more efficiently. So these are just few use cases that I'm sharing. Like I said, it's still at a very nascent stage because while there are tools that are being used, there is no legal framework to actually, govern them. So this means that they have to be used responsibly because there's a gap between, ethical usage and then being, the kind of options you have in the market. So the onus really is on the users now to ensure that there is responsible AI that they are using.
And what's your favorite, or what tool you find most efficient, maybe out of these use cases you mentioned?
I like a tool called Case Mine. So that helps you really pull out judicial precedents when you're doing legal research. The other are some meeting management tools where you log in using them and they actually create good crisp meeting summaries.
You started saying about legal framework. This is what really interests me. How Indian legal system responded to the rise of AI. You mentioned there is no legal framework, but it's no legal framework regarding attorneys or no legal framework at all yet.
So, India has a legal framework on generally information technology. We don't have a framework specifically addressing AI. But having said that, the Indian government increasingly is realizing the importance and the power of AI. And we are seeing this because there are several government initiatives, like, for instance, government holds several summits on responsible usage of AI, on knowledge sharing through AI development, etc. We also have certain policy think tanks who are making recommendations to the government on what an AI focused law should look like, where the emphasis is on ensuring that it's ethical usage, there is no breach of privacy or data, but at the same time it doesn't curb innovation in any manner. So there are multiple efforts running in parallel, whether it is government initiatives, policy think tanks, etc. But it's not resulted in any actual AI focused law yet. But very recently, the Ministry of Information Technology, which is really our chief regulator for IT, and they recently came out with an AI focused advisory. And what that meant was any platform or an intermediary using AI tools was expected to ensure that there was no bias, the integrity of the platform was maintained. They were also expected to ensure that there is full disclosure to the users that there are AI tools at play, so that if there is any inconsistencies, any inaccuracies, the user has sufficient notice of it. And of course, they also wanted these platforms to capture a sense of responsibility on the users, that if you misuse these AI tools, for example, to generate deep fakes, then the onus and the liability really is on the person misusing the AI tool. So this has been a very progressive development in the last
Mhm.
couple of months. Outside of all of this, in parallel, there have been very strong efforts to revamp the information technology law in India, because it's over 20 years old. So there is something called the Digital India Act, which is in the pipeline, and it's supposed to get rolled out in the coming year. And from what we hear, and we as a firm have been part of several, invite to lead stakeholder consultations, and from what we hear, there is going to be an AI focused chapter in the Digital India Act. So I think that's when we are finally going to have a law that specifically addresses the concerns that emerge from AI usage.
Are there any specific rules regarding lawyers, for instance, bar internal rules, or some similar regulation that prohibits or supports or corrects usage of AI in legal practice?
Unfortunately, not, because even the rules that really regulate and advocate, or how they are meant to practice, are almost, you can say, 60 years plus.
Hmm.
So way before the emergence of AI. But having said that, lawyers are increasingly using AI. So it appears like we will have to wait for the Digital India Act and its specific AI focus as the more generic law on AI, as opposed to expecting each sector to come out with their own AI regulation. So I think it's going to be a long time before AI for lawyers is specifically regulated.
Okay, it's really interesting because it's similar to Polish situation where we don't have any specific rules for lawyers, and we have very old code of ethics. But of course, we have AI Act that will regulate in the future the use of AI in each branch. But how do you think AI will affect the role of lawyers in India? Do you see it as a tool that enhances efficiency, potential disruptor to traditional legal roles? Should lawyers be afraid of that? Are they afraid of that?
I think this is a heavily debated topic where there has been a lot spoken about whether AI is going to replace lawyers. Will it mean lesser opportunities for lawyers? I think the way I see it, I look at AI really complementing lawyers rather than, disrupting or replacing them. Because the more routine or time consuming matters can now be outsourced to AI tools, with lawyers getting the opportunity to focus on more complex, non routine matters, which I think frees up a lot of your time spent on lesser quality but more voluminous work. So, I in fact think this can be a great tool to help lawyers manage their time efficiently and to put their attention on matters that really deserve it. Again, I think it's just the AI with its the very nature is such that the efficiency of an AI tool depends on how much it has been used, how it's processed all the information, because it learns on the go. So even today, it's impossible to fully delegate work in its entirety to an AI tool, because for instance, if you take, say, legal research, if you just let an AI tool do the research and you rely on it, there could be scope for inaccuracies or error, which is obviously not acceptable when you're advising a client. So there'll always be a requirement for human intervention to actually thoroughly, process what the AI generates, so to ensure that the quality of advice is not diluted. Similarly, the way in which AI tools are being used, let's say you are using an AI tool to, say, do a contract management process where you're trying to understand historically what sort of damages were paid for a particular breach. Now, again, while it can help you skim through the documents, the actual analysis and advice to the client will always have to be done by a legal expert. So I truly see, AI tools helping with more of the clerical work, for example, helping us summarize documents, taking care of more routine, repetitive tasks. And yeah, I think in that sense, lawyers today will get the opportunity to focus on more of the quality work.
But what about people who handle with these obligations, with these tasks today? We have the same discussion in Europe, and it's often taken this position that lawyers will be supported by AI. But many of these tasks are now or were in the past done by human. So what about them?
Good time for them to also look at upskilling in many ways,
Mhm.
because you're right, I think a lot of this work, for lack of better options, historically was done manually. But now it's a good opportunity to focus on upskilling oneself, to try and see, how you could invest your time on work that is more challenging, more complex, that really requires a nuanced approach, as opposed to more mundane tasks.
I agree. In Europe, data privacy and security are of utmost importance, especially now when there is an AI Act. There are discussions how it influences GDPR or the European data protection regulation. How is it in India? There is a Digital Personal Data Protection Act, and how does it intersect with the use of AI?
This is actually a very well-timed question, because we have in India been waiting for a new data privacy law for a long, long time. And I think this initially inspired by the GDPR, the regulators started putting together a draft for a new data privacy law, but it's been in the pipeline for a long time. And last year, we finally saw the new Digital Personal Data Protection Act take shape, but it's still not in effect yet. What that means is that the act has been passed, but it will not come into force till the rules are in place. So, right now, we are awaiting it coming into force. But yes, I think the timing could not be better, because, with AI, the biggest risk one faces is that the amount and the volume of data that an AI tool processes, because it constantly uses the data which is input for training the machine, the model itself. There is always a risk that the data that is being utilized should not be confidential. If it's personal data, it needs to be, you need to still follow all the do's and don'ts as per the data privacy laws which are applicable. I think in the interim, while we were awaiting the new data law, we of course have an existing data privacy framework, but most organizations couple that with their own set of internal policies and do's and don'ts, which ensured that there was some sense of accountability and data security which was prioritized. But I think once the Digital Personal Data Protection Act is in place, hopefully, I think the companies will take a more conscious call to ensure that consents are in place, because that's a very key element of the new data privacy law. So, to ensure that any AI related processing of data is not happening at the back end automatically, everything has been consented. So when you take consent, it has to be informed consent. So again, there is full disclosure of the fact that there are AI tools to the end user, which I think is another gap that exists today. The only area where I think we have to see how this plays out is the new data privacy law specifically exempts any publicly available information. So
Mhm.
publicly available information are not treated as personal data, and hence don't enjoy the same status when it comes to data privacy, as compared to the other personal information that exists. Now, because of this, if let's say publicly available information is used to train an AI tool, now, to what extent can the person whose information is out there in the public really claim data privacy rights remains to be seen. And again, the converse is, if that tool tomorrow misuses your information, just because the information is publicly available, does that mean that the data subject has really no rights in law to, actually enforce them? I think that remains to be seen. But specifically, the new data privacy law doesn't really, focus or highlight the overlap between AI and data privacy, which is why I think some of these aspects we'll have to see how they play out.
When is it
When is
expected to be applicable? Is it few months, few weeks, or years?
I think few months, because we have the act in final shape already, and it's already been over a year that we've been awaiting the law to come into effect. And very recently, there was one more set of consultations that happened, and during that, the communication was that it's expected soon enough.
Really interesting. So companies entering the market should pay really high attention to this new law that it's coming into force. So final question, looking ahead, how do you envision the future of AI and law in India, maybe in next 5 years? What changes do you expect to see in the legal landscape, except for this digital personal data protection?
I actually feel that none of these, whether it's delays in the data privacy law or the lack of an AI law, has managed to curb the increasing use of AI. So I see the usage to consistently keep on increasing. Possibly, there being more interesting tools in the market that lawyers can use. I was just, in fact, reading how certain jurisdictions have AI models that help templatize agreements, help convert non-legal text into legal verbiage, etc. So I think we can see a lot of these innovative AI tools in the market. I think where the law will have to play catch up is, of course, have a regulatory framework to govern misuse, any potential misuse. But more importantly, I think the judiciary will also have to interpret existing laws in the context of emerging technology. So, for instance, very recently there was a matter before the Indian courts where a very popular celebrity's voice was used in a cartoon character with the help of AI, and he was able to get a favorable order by making a claim that his personality rights were violated by usage of AI. Now, historically, the Indian IPR, or intellectual property right laws, have not really had AI specific laws or interpretations. So, this was a first in that sense, where despite AI being the cause of this misuse, the courts really upheld the personality rights of the celebrity. Now, similarly, I was also reading that in some other jurisdictions, AI generated images was still seen as original works carrying copyright, despite the fact that work was creation of an AI. The author of the work was seen as the person who was actually giving the required instructions to create that work. So I think we will need to see more of these kind of precedents where Indian courts don't hesitate to interpret existing conventional laws which probably are in place for a long, long time, even before the emergence of AI. But it's time to interpret them in the context of new age technology to ensure that rights are upheld and there is no misuse of AI.
It's really interesting context that it's also really discussed in the UK or in the European Union, as AI Act doesn't regulate IP rights. So I would be very interested in making a second episode how it has developed in some time. For now, Namita, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. I think our listeners will take away a lot of valuable information how AI is changing the way law is practiced in such a dynamic country as India. Thank you for being here.
I truly enjoyed this and thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I'm happy to do the next session on IPR.
And you all, thank you for tuning in to Monday Bagel. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your thoughts in the comments, especially if there is a topic or guest you would like us to cover in the future. We'll see you next time with more discussions at intersection of AI and law.